You've heard the phrase study smarter, not harder thousands of times, but do you actually know what it means? And I'm not saying, oh, it means you should just have better quality revision and not great quantity. I mean, do you actually know how to actionably put study smarter, not harder into practice? I don't think you do. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how, because I genuinely had no idea what it meant to study smarter, not harder, right up until probably midway through my A-levels. And now, especially having come to Cambridge and having been taught all of these different revision techniques, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of what it actually means. So I'm going to be talking you through it. But first of all, I just want to touch very, very quickly on why it's actually important. Now, needless to say, spending hours and hours every single day studying is not going to be sustainable if you're doing it in a way that isn't actually helping you. Now, what I mean by this is that some people can study 8 hours a day consistently and not get burnt out because they have an efficient schedule. And that's fine, and I'm not going to say that that is a wrong thing to do. What I am saying is the wrong thing to do is if you're consistently studying for 8 to 10 hours every single day, but you're not seeing the results that you're looking for, that's when it becomes unsustainable, because you don't have any motivation to continue doing it. In fact, you don't have any motivation to continue even with 2 hours a day, simply because the strategies that you're employing in your revision are not helping you move closer towards your goals. And at that point, you might be thinking, well, what's the point of me revising whatsoever? And I don't want you to get to that stage, especially because we're in exam season, especially because it really, really matters. And hard work is super, super important. There's a myth around hard work when it comes to studying. And that myth is that hard work translates into results. It doesn't. Targeted, consistent, efficient work, that's what translates into results. And that's what I'm going to be explaining how you can actually apply in your studying processes. Now, there are 5 key principles that are going to allow you to study smarter, not harder. The first of those principles is you should always be thinking about active recall, not just passive review. Now, the split is very clear. Active recall is the Feynman technique. It is utilising flashcards. It is blurting. It is utilising the whiteboard method. It is anything that means you're not looking at a video, you're not looking at a textbook, you're not looking at your notes, you're just taking information out of your brain. So past papers and past paper questions are also wonderful forms of active recall. Now, on the other side, what is passive? Because a lot of you know what active stuff is, but you kind of trick yourself into thinking that these things that are actually passive are active as well. So what's passive? Passive is reading through your textbook. It is watching videos. It is making notes as you're doing both of those things. Yes, making notes is a form of passive revision. That doesn't mean it's not important. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do that if you like to have handwritten notes. What it does mean is you shouldn't convince yourself that that type of studying is going to give you equivalent results to doing past papers or to blurting or to using flashcards. It won't, simply because you're not using your brain to engage with the material. You're just copying down what someone else is saying. And yes, that can get bits of information into your head, but that's going to make it really, really hard for you to be able to approach questions in an exam, because in an exam, they're not going to ask you questions exactly how they're written in the textbook. But if you are only revising by utilising a study resource and not actively engaging your brain and thinking about how you actually understand something, then you're not going to be able to make that link between what's being asked of you in an exam and what you've learned. And that can be the most common pitfall for students who think, do you know what, I've spent hours and hours revising this content, why am I not seeing the results in my papers? 9 times out of 10, it's because you're not studying to do well in the exam, you're studying to learn word for word what is in the textbook or what is in a certain video. So that is why it makes it really important that you're utilising active studying techniques. Principle number 2 is to utilise spaced repetition. Cramming is never going to be the answer. Cramming can boost your grade the night before an exam. That is absolutely true, and I would never deny that because I think it can work. What it can't do is give you consistent results over time, and it cannot get the amount of knowledge into your brain that you need to be getting top grades in an exam if that exam is right around the corner. What you need is to think about this principle called the forgetting curve. Now, the forgetting curve is basically a little convex curve. And the principle behind it is that over time, your retention of what you study is going to go down in that sort of a pattern. Now, each time you go back and review material, the forgetting curve gets flatter. So it goes from this to perhaps this to this, and what that actually translates to in real life is that means that it takes longer for you to forget the content. So let's say I learn a new topic on Monday. If I do not touch that new topic until the next Monday, I will have forgotten pretty much 90% of it, according to this theory. If I'd reviewed that topic on Wednesday, and then again on Friday, and then again on the Monday, I would have probably only forgotten about 10% of it. Do you see how powerful spaced repetition is? Constantly going back to things means it takes longer for you to forget them, which means you're more likely to retain them and recall them in an exam, and therefore be closer to getting those grades that you want. Principle 3 is about interleaving, not just time blocking. If you have 4 hours to revise on a certain day, spending 4 hours dedicated to one subject is going to cause your brain to be less able to focus, and you're going to get fatigue a lot quicker than if you'd done an hour of 4 different subjects. Not necessarily even 4 different subjects, you could have done an hour of 4 different topics related to the same subject, but if you spend too long on one thing, then your brain capacity to gain any sort of marginal benefit of spending extra time on that subject is decreasing. So what you should be doing is trying to find ways of doing one thing for a little bit and then moving on and then maybe returning to that original thing. Obviously don't do this too quickly, because if you do this like one subject, another subject every 20 minutes, let's say, you're not going to be able to spend enough time on any of those subjects to actually get key principles into your brain to get you in the zone. So don't do it too quickly, but equally don't spend too long on one singular subject. There's no hard and fast rule about how long you should be spending. It is very individual, but as a rule of thumb, an hour to an hour and a half for an individual subject or individual topic area that you're spending time on is probably going to be the maximum that you can study at peak performance before your brain capacity to retain starts to decrease quite rapidly. Principle number 4 is to not spend too long revising, and to actually move on to practice, to application, to past paper questions and full past papers. You will never feel 100% ready, 100% confident in a subject, pretty much ever, because there are always other things that you could know, other things you could learn, other books, videos that you could watch and read. But at some point you've got to move on to actually taking the knowledge that you've been trying to learn and that you've been trying to get into your head and applying it to the way that it's going to be tested in an exam. If you leave that too late, then you might know lots of the content off by heart, but you're going to do a lot worse than someone who'd spent longer honing in their exam technique, understanding what the examiners actually want from you in the questions, and practicing their timing for the exams. So generally you should be giving yourself pretty much a month of exam practice. Now I'm going to hold my hands up and say that I have my first exam in less than a week and I have not done a proper past paper for it. And I know that that is not the best revision strategy, so what I'm doing is I'm shifting my revision timetable to make sure that I'm prioritizing doing exams and exam practice a lot more than just continuing to try and get content into my head. And principle number 5 is to always review the process, not just the results. So what does that actually mean? That means when you do an exam or when you do a past paper, don't just look at the grade that you got and think, oh, is that good? Is that bad? How have I, is that the grade that I really want to be getting? I want you to also think about the process. What went well? Did you remember topics that, for example, you used the whiteboard method for more than you remember topics that you used blurting for? Well, then you know that you should be prioritising the whiteboard method in your revision moving forward. Did you feel like you didn't understand a lot of the definitions, you couldn't remember them? Then that's a sign that you want to be making flashcards. Did you feel like your timing was off on the essay? More practice. Don't just look at the grade and move on. You want to be analysing and understanding where that grade came from, what your strengths, what your weaknesses were, because that is the fundamental bread and butter of how you're going to be able to improve your grade. Because if you just look at the grade and wish for it to improve the next time because you're going to put more hours in but do the same thing, then you're going to get discouraged very quickly because you're not going to be seeing that grade improve because you're not targeting the things that actually you personally need to be fixing in order to boost that grade. So those are the 5 principles of how you're going to be able to study smarter, not harder. I really hope this helps, and I hope it's come at a useful time for you during this exam season, particularly if you're in the UK doing GCSEs and A-levels. You have a half term this week. You've got the time to be thinking about how you can make your systems much smarter, less harder, and translate into better grades. As ever, let me know if you have any comments or questions in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.